Welcome back to the harbor. I'm your host, the Kino Cowboy. I'm here with my boys, like usual, Scott Keith, Austin Casher. Today, we're talking our very first Terrence Malick film, Days of Heaven from 1978. I was when I was doing curation for this year's season of the harbor, I was thinking, well, who are some directors I wanted to hit this time that we haven't hit? Terrence Malick was definitely one of them. He was one of my earliest filters in like 11th grade, I think.
Tree of Life.
Yeah, Tree of Life. I
Yeah, and
remember.
that's even for him, that's considered dense, is it not?
Yeah, but
I need to rewatch it.
we watched Tree of Life back then. Me and Casher were not, as
Yeah.
patrician as we are now.
I haven't watched it since either.
You would like it more now as like
Yeah.
a, adult who understands different kinds of dream logic
Complicated
and
things. Yeah.
experimental filmmaking and stuff. But so I was wanting to see one of his earlier films. I thought about doing Badlands, but this one caught my eye because I hadn't seen this one, and I heard that this is really where he found his artistic voice, and I was correct upon watching it because this film is very non-traditionally made and also non-traditionally edited, and it's less narrative than you think going in, and that's really what I wanted to talk about today
Yeah.
is
They're
the
reading
power
some
of
of this.
editing.
They're reading some of the stuff after watching it and made me understand it a little bit better. And like maybe like it a little bit more. Um, Especially along the lines of this is being told through the eyes of the young girl, his little
So
sister.
important.
So the emotional, so you're not, a lot of people had complaints about the emotion being shown, but of course that little girl's not going to see and experience the same adult emotions that are happening. And it's going to be a little muted on that tone. And that's what I was reading throughout. I was like, oh, that makes more sense.
Yeah,
Interesting,
for sure.
interesting narrative choice.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot. So Terrence Malick is a very spiritual guy, and there's by the way, this is my first Malick film.
Really
But
cool.
I never knew where to get in with him, and this is a good place, I feel.
We started with Tree of Life.
Yeah, I didn't think that was the right one. I was like, should I just watch the Thin Red Line and just rip a
Dude, I was
band-aid
just
off?
say I've only ever seen a Thin Red Line. Besides this, I've been meaning Badlands has been on my fucking list forever.
Um, and I mean, I had heard of this because I remember in film class, we were talking about the golden hour, which is only about half an hour. And that's when basically sunset, dusk, it's a fancy cinematography word for that, which made this a giant pain in the ass to shoot because they used almost entirely natural lighting in this. And so you had about half an hour every day as opposed to 10, 12, 16 hours a day to shoot, which the cast and crew were, they didn't understand his vision. Now I understand Terrence Malick, who is notoriously reclusive. There's like 3 photos of him in existence, maybe. Um, yeah, I can understand getting fed up with that. Like, why are we standing around with mosquitoes biting us in Canada, not in the Panhandle of Texas, it's Canada, um, and dealing with all this to only shoot for 30 minutes a day? What is going on? Who is this guy who's had one other film? Why did anybody give him money? Um, and I mean, this movie definitely went over budget. But anyway, what you said about this being through the eyes of a child, this entire thing is a morality play. And I don't like drawing one-to-one metaphor sort of comparisons in movies because I wouldn't even call this a poem. This is a meditation on morality. Definitely reminiscent of Mirror, or some
I
other
was
thing.
literally gonna bring up. Yeah, that's I
It's
couldn't remember the
yeah,
fucking name. Yeah,
Tarkovsky had to be mentioned with this just
yeah.
from there's voiceover, there's editing choices that are yeah, this movie I felt like this movie respected me as an audience member to understand what it's going for, and
Mhm.
it's sort of Eden-esque,
Yeah.
uh biblical fall
Plagues.
analogs. There's also Luciferian analogs. Richard Gere is almost like Lucifer in this movie.
He's also way too fucking handsome. Richard Gere used to be so hot. I was seeing
Yeah,
like that first scene of him in the factory. I was like, God damn it! They picked a good man for this.
Yeah,
They
it's
did.
like I had to hear enough of that growing up from my
That's
mom.
fair. That's
She
from Pretty
was
Woman, though.
she's pretty woman pilled just like a lot of women her age.
Yeah.
They love that movie, so I
I
had to see it on TV all the time.
He's
So
like handsome hood in this, and I love it. And that's one of the things I really love is that here I'm a sucker for that shitty accent that they all have, like throughout it.
What,
Uh,
Chicago?
yeah,
Are you saying their accents are shitty or that the
dude, it's
Chicago
it's
accent is
like
shitty?
it's like old school Midwest or like Northeast accent, and I fucking love shit like that. Like it's like all I want to hear him is talk about extra, extra, read all about it. I want to hear that the entire time. That's what as soon as I heard the narrator, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna like this movie solely for that.
and I love the setup it has with all of the photos from that era.
Oh, it's
And it
beautiful. The
gives you the
music like
time
is
and the place.
the
And it's
music's
that
one of
time
the
period is always
best.
fascinating because it felt like the future was still well ahead of everyone. You know, they were just now settling in America, and they were
Well, it's
still.
1916, so you're well past a lot of the settling and
I
colonizing
know, but like it
of
was
this.
kind of like a finalization. Like, okay, we're settled in now. What's
Yeah.
going on?
Well, it
You
took me
know,
a second to really like because it does look like almost like pioneer ages at some points, especially with the way that they're plowing fields and
yeah,
stuff
it's
like
because
that.
like not there's still plenty of country left to be
Exactly. It's
settled
not
in.
everything's been touched.
New
Uh,
innovations.
it's like he
Still,
comes from massive factories where he's spooling in coal and like this huge industrial revolution that's happened in Chicago and in the Northeast and everything has absolutely not hit Midwest whatsoever or the upper plains of Texas. But this definitely like seeing all the plains and things like that. I get why we have that America the Beautiful song, dude. That fucking
yeah, it's
some of
definitely
the most
like
beautiful settings I've seen in a movie.
land of opportunity core.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Uh I go ahead.
No, go ahead. You know,
Well, it's like a lot of this though. It does like because I'm wondering if how much of a change it was for him being a laborer, and you know his whole family being in Chicago, settling into the Midwest, and like if it was like a culture shock for them immediately, or if they like knew what they were getting into.
I wonder if I wonder if his family kind of. I feel like they may have been around from place to place trying new things and kind of fucking up at different turns because
Yeah, they
this guy seems
seem
very unstable, and that's where it starts out with him pretty much killing that guy. So,
yeah.
um,
Uh,
I
yeah,
almost do you think this is a complete reach, but do you think that's him killing God because he's a Luciferian figure? You know, do you think that's him revolting as he's shoveling the coals of hell?
is that would you say the factory owner is God or is someone else in this
No,
film?
I'm not saying. I was saying that, but I'm
Uh,
talking out of my ass right
okay.
now
yeah,
completely.
Sometimes we gotta talk those thoughts out.
I know. I just like putting it out
that's
there just to
fun.
be pretentious and sound smarter than I actually am. Um,
The huh?
there's a lot of dialectics in this movie. There's definitely there's good and evil, and there's also agrarian lifestyle versus industrial, which I think Terrence Malick comes out against industrialization as this sort of corruption of the natural world. But I also think he acknowledges that um, there's something under the surface of agrarian, like taming the wilderness, because you are destroying something. And we get these amazing shots of all of the birds or pheasants or whatever they are and skunks kind of getting their homes destroyed as they harvest all of this grain.
Just being fucking
And everybody else is like frolicking practically. They're working hard because I do feel like there, and it's seen from the eyes of a child, which we said is important. There is like a happiness when they finally get out of the city and into this landscape, and then they think it's a fresh start. But I think very quickly their hands become worn again with all this hard ass work. I remember I said to my dad recently, I was like, who grew up like raising cattle and stuff. I don't know if you guys knew that about my nerdy, lanky ass
No, I
dad.
didn't actually.
Yeah, he did. My grandfather was a cattleman. Um, and I was like, I don't know. Part of the farm life seems like it has an appeal to me. And my dad's like, no, it's hard work. My dad's been kicked in the chest by cows, you know.
Yeah, I my family comes from like raising chickens and stuff, and that was punishment. For like 2 weeks in the summer when I got into a lot of trouble when I was 14, was sent to a small town in Arkansas to go and chicken farm, which is the worst fucking thing I've ever done in my life.
Right. I'm just imagining Napoleon Dynamite right now.
Yeah,
That's all.
that's the same thing I was thinking of.
Yeah,
It's like $1 an hour.
Well,
it's-
especially with modern industrial agriculture, that's a whole other thing.
dude,
But I
Uncle
think
Jesse
there's a
didn't
lot
pay
of
well.
romanticization of the countryside. I'm like, no, it's still kind of shitty, and that comes out by the end of this movie for sure.
Yeah, there's a short anecdote. My dad likes to, well, his brothers, all of his brothers, chief fucking cigarettes like chimneys. And he has never touched a cigarette in his life, has never smoked one. And I asked him, I was like, "You never smoked cigarettes?" He's like, "No, and I never will." And I was like, "Why?" He said, "Because back in the old country, under communist ruling, as a small child, I was having to pick tobacco fields for 10 hours a day. And if you did that, you'd never want to smoke a cigarette in your life." I was like, "You're damn right. I would
Yeah,
never
well,
do
I
that."
flipped a bunch of McDonald's burgers back in the day, but I'll go have a fucking Big Mac every now and then.
That's true. I did like when I started working at McDonald's as a teenager, people like, once you see what's behind the doors, you'll never want to eat there again. I was like, I was under no illusion that this was a Michelin star
No,
restaurant.
dude.
Yeah.
One of my biggest cravings is still a fucking McNugget, dude. I will once every few weeks go
You're
get a
making
big
me
ass
hung-
box of McNuggets.
You're making me hungry right now, you know.
Yeah, now you can watch POV videos on YouTube of people working shifts at McDonald's. It's not that crazy.
Man, no, it's not. It's all just fucking. It's all automated. Half of it, like you just push buttons.
Yeah, you just got to get into a rhythm. It was fascinating, but I watched it for like 20 minutes. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not getting paid for this.
Dude. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get caught
but
up on those a lot.
I think
Uh,
what was so fascinating to me is the edit of this film is really what created it. And to me, editing is where the movie comes together, and it's almost like it's almost like magic. Like it's almost like some alchemic reaction to me. Like any other lesser filmmaker would not have a good movie here.
no,
Because at one point he was getting so fed up with the dailies that he tossed them out and just started shooting shit just to shoot it. And
fucking A.
decided
Well,
he
and
would-
imagine Terrence Malick doesn't have the reputation yet because this
Very
movie.
Kubrick. It's very Kubrick-esque.
Yeah. So I would have hated to work on this film.
but it's
Quite
like
honestly.
you don't even know what you're doing, it seems like, but he does mostly. And it just worked out. Like I don't know, it's just so fascinating. The behind the scenes of this is just as interesting as the film. And because no, he could have formed just such a lesser narrative, but everything just happened to come together perfectly. And it's the fact that the imagery is the narrative in a lot of ways. You're not getting much of the story. You're getting kind of like whispers, like you're almost like you're on the farm with these people and kind of just overhearing things and putting it together yourself.
Yeah.
That's what's so cool about this movie. Because at first I'm like, well, what the hell is going on? And then I kind of could see the lines drawn from his later work back to now when it comes to this kind of style of filmmaking and storytelling. And it's interesting because the film's only 90 minutes. And with this kind of imagery and the kind of web he's weaving, you would think it's almost like he wants you to linger, but he won't let you. It just moves right on. And I found that really ballsy in a way, editing wise. And that's what really made me like this movie.
Yeah, I will say it's refreshing that we got a 90-minute movie instead of a fucking 2.5, 3 hour movie the past few ones. I was able to knock this one out and really pay attention.
Yeah, because
and
we're
enjoy
doing
it.
for people at home, next episode is going to be Conan the Barbarian. And when I got both of these movies to watch for the Harbor, I was my shock that the Terrence Malick film was 90 minutes and Conan the Barbarian was 2 hours and 10 minutes. And I was like, wait, I thought these were, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, I think the 90 minutes really is. If they would have drawn it out a little too long, I could see it suffering from that.
No,
it's short,
absolutely.
sweet,
And I
and to
feel
the
like
point.
this movie gives you plenty of time to linger. I felt like I was drawn out. I mean, this is pretty much a perfectly paced movie for me because I did feel almost, even despite the subject matter being family of family falling apart basically, and con artists, I still felt relaxed almost watching this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And part
there's
of
a
that has to
lot
do
of
with the weather here is actually fitting. It's actually nice today after all the polar vortexes and crap we've
Yeah.
been having
no,
going
this
on.
movie with the subject matter felt rather pleasant through most of it. Like, did not feel like stress inducing. Honestly, I was like, man, I could go frolic in a fucking field of wheat and feel real good about myself.
Right. And
Uh,
again, all of that is because this is told from the eyes of a child,
hmm.
um, who's I don't even know how literate this person is. We see the daughter,
I bet she's barely, if she's gone to school at all, she has not been to school in a long time.
right, because we see her looking at a picture book at one time, which I think adds to it. With just looking at the pictures, which to me, again, respecting me as a viewer and giving me the time to think without completely taking me out of the story. Linda, that's the kid's name. I don't even remember if they say it in the movie,
Yeah,
but
that actress actually just passed away a few years ago.
oh, really, that's unfortunate. Yeah, and the actress is named Linda too. But it gives you enough time to interpret what's going on. And I love this style of storytelling, this iceberg storytelling. Hemingway talked about it a lot, of like, just give people enough where they can understand the subtext and respect the audience.
Mhm.
Because it's something I think really isn't done today, because you have to media literacy, we talk about it on here, but you have to explain to people what it's about, because you can't even have a bad guy in a movie without people wondering, well, is the author endorsing these views, or is the writer endorsing these views? It's like, no, they're the bad
Getting
guy,
frustrated.
or maybe they're entering a conversation with these ideas and the nuances they're in. You
I
freaking
like that you
idiot.
have to reevaluate when I watch things. I like having to reevaluate, like, do I like this person because of how, even though they're so bad and so like just morally reprehensible. Like, I'm watching Succession right now, and I've had to stop a few times and like take the night off from watching it, being like, I like this person too much, and this person is fucking
Yeah,
awful.
every Scorsese movie.
Every Scorsese, I was about to say, I was thinking The Godfather. Every mobster crime movie, it's like Henry Hill's. He's a piece, man, and not just because he's a rat.
Yeah, well, Tony Soprano is another one you have to reevaluate how much you really like him. I like shit like that a lot. Which I was gonna say, the story for this is like, because it's told to the child, it's super simple. Like, it's a very like to the point con story. But the way it's acted out and the way it's shot makes it so much more.
It's
And
all
I
in the execution of
and I feel like
living in the edit.
Terrence Malick inspired a lot of modern filmmakers with some of the cinematography and editing here.
It's one of the
Uh,
best looking movies of all time.
yeah, dude,
Like,
this is
legitimately.
the on the cast. I think this and Mirror are the two best looking movies we've probably seen.
It's like
Like, there's literal scenes in
crazy.
this when like the locusts are coming down and it's got that red tint, and I'm like, this P.T. Anderson has to have been partial for like his inspiration to go to this area because of like certain scenes in There Will Be Blood.
This is I did think of There Will Be Blood with this, and just a lot of westerns in general.
Yeah.
This is, which is weird because this could be a western. It's in West Texas. I mean, it's in the Panhandle, but no, not West Texas, in the Panhandle of Texas. Excuse me. But it's I tonally it's too different from a western, which is weird because there's a lot of other movies I might throw in as a western, despite not having the tropes exactly. But and this is a morality play. There's a man on the run by the end of it, but just tonally, it's so different. I can't put it in that genre, even though on paper it fits that in a lot of ways, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I think
Um,
this would work really well as a stage play.
Could be.
Like,
It's
I
really
see. I disagree completely because I
yeah.
think it's too simple for a stage play. I mean, you could tell this story as a stage play, but you'd have to completely rewrite it, to the point where it would be nigh unrecognizable. Because this is a love story,
Yeah.
a love triangle,
I think
essentially.
the simplicity of it would transfer well to like stage for me. That's just me thinking though.
I mean, no, I understand in terms of setting it would, but like you would have to add on to it, because there almost wouldn't be enough there. because there's hardly any dialogue in this movie.
Mm.
I feel like this is a 90-minute movie with about 20, 30 pages of dialogue, maybe.
How many films had Richard Gere done before this? Was he like a big name then?
I don't know. This is certainly Pretty Woman. I almost said Little Woman. And we'll talk about the characters. You say this makes you want to reevaluate the characters. How do you view the characters and their moralities in this movie? And let's start with Bill. Let's start with Richard's character. Is it Gere or Gere? I always never know.
It's Gere.
It's Gere. Okay.
Yeah, he's got the loosest morality, but it comes from a necessity to wanting to provide a better life for both his sisters. And but also he's rugged. You know, you can tell he's got the abuse there. Like he's been through the fucking ringer. So of course you're gonna have loose morality, and I don't agree with what he's doing, but I understand that he needs to do things certain ways to get ahead on people.
And in his defense, he did think that the farmer, whose name is just the farmer, was gonna die because he overheard that he has a terminal illness that he apparently dodges.
Which, like, fucking, hey, get in when you fit in. Like, that's not an awful idea.
Man, look, I understand wanting to do whatever you can to have a better life, especially back then when factory work and other shit like that is really horrible, and people were fighting tooth and nail to get like raises back then and better working conditions, but it was so fucking horrible. So of course, he's probably been through a lot, but that doesn't excuse his behavior at the beginning of the film, and that really sets the precedent for me that he's kind of a piece of shit. So
no, he has an anger problem, let's say, because the foreman or whoever that is gets onto him, and we don't see the guy die, but he very well could have.
Yeah, no, it says he died. The other thing is, like, he's definitely quick to anger after his friend or like the coworker was like, "So your sister keep you warm at night?" And he just like throws his food at him and
too is that he could have been way smarter. Like, if you're gonna go that hardcore with your plan, you can't be flirting around and kissing in broad daylight. Like, that's just how it is. That's something you need to accept. So obviously he's not smart enough to pull it off. So I don't feel any sympathy for him.
No, and also I think part of I assume that maybe I didn't pick this up. The reason that they pose as brother and sister is because they had that child out of wedlock or something.
Are you talking about Linda?
Yeah.
That's
I think
Linda's
it's his little sister. I think they pose it because I don't think they let couples work like that.
Yeah, I think
I'm not sure, but
I think that's
what I think. I don't
think the reason they don't let couples work like that.
Or it would be looked real down upon if you're the man and you're letting your wife work.
Yeah.
Then, I'm not sure though.
That's definitely seems to me the reason.
Honestly, the ending for me though, with Abby inheriting and letting Linda's finally in school and things like that, that's a happy ending. Like, fuck the farmer who's like taking advantage of all these people for cheap labor. Fuck Bill for being a cheap dime store hood. Abby inherits the farmer estate and fucking is able to raise Linda and have a good life.
How does he inherit? She didn't inherit shit.
She inherits the farmer's estate and leaves Linda at a boarding school. Is what it says.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's according to Wikipedia. That's what it says.
It's not explicitly said.
But I feel like it's not explicitly said, but I did think that because I don't want to get this whole discussion from Wikipedia, but it's not explicitly said, but at the same time, I don't know where she'd get the money to pay for boarding school. And it looks like she's wearing nice clothes and stuff. I mean, they did sell, I think, the car and jewelry at the stuff at the end. But then she goes off with those soldiers. We're getting way ahead of ourselves here. But is she just going to try to find another sugar daddy, or is she just leaving her whole life behind? Does she plan on coming back for Linda? It's a very open ending. And is it a happy ending? And who is it a happy ending for?
I don't know. My big thing is Bill was not going to have a happy ending regardless, especially seeing the soldiers at the end. That boy was going to go to war. And so it's like she's able to get out on her own adventure. I don't know. I find that's a dub in the chat. Dubs in the chat, guys.
I think he would have gotten out of going to war somehow. He seems like that would have.
I don't know. In World War I, it was real hard to do that. just in general to get out of kind of the, I don't know if
He's
did they
kind of a
draft for World
slimy
War
guy.
One?
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. He'd have to go to Canada or something.
He'd be willing to do that, I think.
I don't know. He might see it as a way to like be able to provide. So I think that's like his whole intention. He's
I
like,
don't know. I
is
think
just
he
to
wants to
provide.
find any slimy, easy way out of an honest day's hard work.
I don't know. I don't look at him as
I
similar as
do.
that.
I do.
He's kind of doing what he needs to
He's
do.
willing to give his wife off to another man just for fucking money. That's
I
not,
mean, that's a lot of money though.
dude. This guy would be a draft dog.
Do you think the farmer and Abby fucked?
Uh,
Yes.
Do you think they got intimate?
Absolutely. They had
I,
to.
I think it took a while.
It took a while. She was reluctant, and I think she fell for the farmer because the farmer, you could argue, is a more moral man. He doesn't do anything wrong,
Yeah.
but he's part of the. Here's where we're talking about. We'll drop the C word with capitalism. And this movie was not made where people were able to get on woke YouTube and from their parents' rooms and learn about how capitalism's bad. But
I resent that.
the this is a very morally gray movie. It's a morality tale, but at the same time, they straight up talk about how everybody has good and evil in them. That is said explicitly in the narration toward the end of the movie by the child.
Yeah.
Can
I make a point real quick before I forget it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my big thing about it is like there's a good and evil, but when you're forced to do evil things to survive, as opposed to making evil choices by basically like abusing and oppressing the workforce, which one's the worst evil? Something to make that you're doing the evil to be comfortable or to survive. Like that's how I've always had my head in it.
He could have just done his work on the farm, and that would have been enough to survive.
He wouldn't have been able to have a home, and that work's inconsistent.
You don't know that.
That's what they were talking about having to leave. The only reason why they stayed is because he fell in love with Abby.
Yeah, it's migrant work essentially.
Yeah, and migrant work is by itself is led by an oppressor.
Right. Yeah, the exact quote is nobody's perfect. You got half devil and half angel in you. Okay, so the guy should have paid more, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or like provided good housing, because there's literally times where they're like laying down in the snow in the field, and like I don't know, it's just
no. There's definitely that, because the whole time they're looking at this nice, beautiful house at the top of the hill, basically, and no one's allowed to get near it or go inside. So you're definitely right on that account with that angle.
I just think that if you're doing things in desperation, immoral things to survive, that is a lesser evil than doing something that is oppressive, because that guy, he's literally sitting in a drinking whiskey in a chair in the field watching the people work. He knows what he's doing is not necessarily it's helping these people, but at the very minimum. And I think that is more evil than what Bill has done.
It was fascinating that the fact that that nice house wasn't just an exterior, but they built the entire thing.
I didn't know that. That's fucking rules.
That's not usually done. So,
but
hey, whatever. I like when you don't have to just go back to sound stages and you decide, well, let's film it inside this actual house. That's cool.
I'm sure it makes it a better movie because it makes it more real. It makes it easier to act. You're on location. You're in that world, which a lot of people hated, especially the crew. They would have to tear down lights that they set up because
it kind of reminds me of like Babylon and like how they were filming in that scene where they had all the Romans in one area and the cowboys and
dude, doing all naturalistic lighting made the movie, so I get it.
It's funny you've been on that. You said that you've been talking about that for a couple of days now, naturalist, or at least a few conversations about naturalistic lighting that we watched.
When you're shooting at Magic Hour,
Yeah, well, it's like we watched like the king of naturalistic lighting for probably a film.
Right, and what we're referring to, we've been talking in our group chat for this podcast, how a lot of modern studio movie Hollywood blockbusters, particularly lighting, they make night look like night when it shouldn't entirely look like night. It should have the illusion of being shot at night.
Yeah.
I think Red Letter Media, hell, I'll just drop them, talked about this at the end of Cocaine Bear. There's a lot of washed out, very blue looking
We were
lighting
talking
at
about that
night.
when we watched that shitty movie.
We talked about that, and then they talked about because it's something going on with filmmaking.
There's so many
And
films that are just like that now.
the quote that is used, it's from whoever was cinematography or on Lord of the Rings, I think, on the original trilogy, on the trilogy for Lord of the Rings. Is that a lot of those scenes like Helm's Deep you were talking puts modern battles and lighting to shame because it's lit obviously not by the moon but by freaking lights, but it still has the illusion, it's verisimilitude. We're not trying to capture realism entirely. They are in this movie, but they aren't always, and that works for this movie. And you have to be incredibly you have to be a pain in the ass like Terrence Malick to work with, apparently. But the proof is in the pudding.
He also has some movie magic too, like the locust scene. Apparently, that's all just like peanut shells being dropped, and that shit's fucking.
They dropped the peanut shells from the helicopter while everyone walked in reverse.
That's fucking awesome. Like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to yell. That was.
Now they actually had locusts on set for close-ups and stuff, but
but that's so cool to me. Like that, I love movie magic like that. Like when I was watching stuff about old Akira Kurosawa movies, and I think it's Ran in particular, where it's all black and white, but they wanted moonlight to shine, so they painted leaves gold so that the sunlight would reflect the gold in the black and white, and it would look like moonlight was hitting in certain places. And it's just like fucking the creativity there is just
it's
insanely impressive.
It always makes me insecure. I'm like, how would they ever do this? I can't think of this.
You gotta get all your what does he say in Super 8? You gotta stand in front of the train and
I don't know.
No, it has to be done on set. Instead of all this post-production digital lighting.
Yeah.
Which, for example, Adrian and I recently saw Godzilla -1 minus color, which is in black and white, and they did digitally alter it to make it look better. But at the same time, it still does, at least to me, it looks like a color film that was converted to black and white.
Is it as good of a conversion as the Platinum Mad Max?
No. I've not seen that, but most people say
that one rules.
A lot of it looked good, and a lot of it did look pretty close as you can to a black and white film. But there are, I'd say, about 20% of the shots of the blacks are too black, and the shadows just overcome. And
some things seem blurry or out of focus. Maybe that was the projector, or maybe that was just me noticing on a second viewing.
Maybe.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And then I guess the biggest example, because I've been watching the Lord of the Rings extended this week, and I was comparing it to the Game of Thrones episode that I saw. I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but I watched scenes from that battle that you can't see.
Battle of the Bastard.
And it's like, how did we get here? Anyway.
Oh, that's not the battle. That's like the last. But yeah, that shit was fucking. Because Battle of the Bastards is great. They filmed that great. That's like the last season, the last battle with the fucking White Walkers. That shit had me enraged. I was so mad because I couldn't see a fucking thing. And I thought it was just because I ate a fucking like 50 milligram edible and I was just really stoned. I watched it like the next day and I was like in the middle of the day and I was like, I can't see a fucking thing.
Yeah, like, try watching on your TV in the daytime. Yeah, dude, it's terrible. And it's like even certain even shows, like some of the stuff in Mandalorian and stuff, I'm like, well, we got to watch this episode at night so the TV looks better so I can see everything.
Well, it's like you set that example of the Jurassic Park natural lighting, which is probably my fucking favorite of all time.
Yeah.
And it's like, why can't we get stuff like that? Like, I don't understand why people don't do it.
Some people
because it takes too long during production and we have the technology to do it in post.
Yeah, that's fair.
Kind of.
That's part of it.
But
and there's I also, honestly, your average viewer who, if you're watching this, you're a film nerd and you're not an average movie viewer, they aren't thinking about this sort of thing, to be fair, but that doesn't mean they don't notice it on a subconscious level.
I would argue that they are, because I'd say average film goers are what makes up a lot of film Twitter, where I see a lot of generalized takes and a lot of people complain about lighting lately that would never be people that would complain about lighting before. So I think it really has taken notice.
It is one of those things, because listen, I'm not a filmmaker. have never been on a film set other than like Adrian doing stuff for YouTube. Not like a professional quote unquote
Yeah.
production. So I don't know how to light a film. If you had asked me, I know what a key light and a fill light is. That's about all I know about lighting. I know
Fair.
the most basic thing you can know. Um, and I do think there's a lot of armchair criticism nowadays, but I do think that's because more people are able to see behind the curtain and have access to this sort of thing. So even more casual film goers are able to pick up these things. People who maybe they don't live and breathe cinema, but they are, movie goers, movie fans, people who like movies.
I just wish they were more media literate.
And that's the thing is like you don't have micro budget filmmakers don't have the money to do the professional grade lighting. So you have to think around side the box. When I make my movies, I make them in a mockumentary kind of format. So you're going to want to use naturalistic lighting anyway, because you want it to look like it's, just shot on someone's camcorder basically. And that's a lot of lower budget films try to do a professional lighting, and it just looks like a cheap porno and it takes you out of the movie. And it's like, dude,
well, that's because you're watching cheap pornos, Adrian. You're getting confused.
No, I've just watched a lot of student films. That's all. But
something you got to learn, and people need to go back and look at older films.
The king of magic hour shooting. It's insane.
No, this is flawless cinematography. It really is, and this is required reading. If I didn't say that already.
Yeah.
You don't read movies, Scott.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no.
Actually, you do.
Yeah, I read
mine in Braille.
But the locust, what do you take of like all the biblical shit in this movie?
It's some of it might be a bit muddied, or again, like I said, I don't like always drawing one-to-one metaphors. Maybe if I saw it again. It coincides with the return of Bill.
Yeah.
In what locusts do, they stay underground for years, growing or being dormant or what. I don't know. I'm not a farmer. Look at me. And then they emerge all at once, which is why they're so scary. And I don't know if it's always on the same cycle or if it depends on the climate, if it's within a certain range. Because I read something like every 17 years, but then I heard like climate change might change that. So I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Not that climate change is real, but that was a joke, guys. Just for those at home. But so funny. But no, that's clearly that's the metaphor for the underlying tensions of everything that's going on and coming to a head. And the guy, the farmer becomes wrathful and burns down his kingdom at the end. He's burning down his Eden with a flaming sword because of the sins that were committed.
There's I'm reading this. I just pulled this article. I just was like, fuck it. I'll throw Days of Heaven biblical comparisons.
Yeah.
And this person's stating that we have to suggest the fall, not saying that the wheat farm itself is Eden.
But there's Edenic imagery and metaphors in this.
But the more interesting one is the story of Cain and Abel, that Bill and Farm are not literally brothers, but what happens to them is a form of fratricide. Or fratricide. And then also accounts of the Last Judgment from a man named Ding Dong, according to Linda's voiceover. Being combined with the plague of locusts. There's a lot of stories kind of intertwined throughout this,
right? Because we have Eden imagery, we also have pre-Eden sort of imagery, like because I could see them being an Adam and Eve getting kicked out of the kingdom due to their sin, but I can also see in a similar sense Lucifer doing to his sin being kicked out of heaven. Oh wait, what's the name of this movie?
Wait, what is this movie called?
Days of Heaven. Okay. I was joking. I've done it during a cast. I was like, wait a minute, what's the name of this thing? I haven't said it on the cast, but I've had to be like, wait, what is this? That's just me being stupid.
That's an interesting article. I'm gonna send it to you guys after. It's on Roger Ebert's website.
Yeah, Ebert was a big champion of this movie, I think.
Reading into it,
I read his review on it. Yeah,
it's like he came back and gave a second point of view that just added more.
He does that a lot. Oh, he did that a lot. Rest in peace.
Sorry, you lost.
Even he gets filtered. He thought Home Alone 3 was the best one.
Yeah. Whoa.
That's I
That's
was
one
gonna
of the
make
most insane. That's
yeah.
the most insane movie take I've heard since my buddy told me that Next Friday is better than Friday. I was like, you get out of my house,
I
dude.
was gonna I
And
was
he,
gonna make a
and he
joke about it, and I can't. That's a joke itself. Like,
Yeah, and it's because it's so great on the actual episode because Siskel, he can't even like fathom it. He can't even figure out what to say. It's so good.
it's so funny.
Uh, yeah. So I feel like this movie, people, I've seen some people argue like he got lucky with the edit coming together as it did, and that like, oh, he decided on to add in the narration because he was struggling with finding a narrative in the edit. That means, oh, he didn't know what he was doing when he was making this movie. I feel like he's more successful as a filmmaker because he brought it together in the edit in that way, and that a lesser filmmaker would have never been able to do that.
He
So
created his own luck.
to me, that just proves it, and that's as much as the filmmaking process as the writing and the directing. So
arguably more of the
yeah,
filmmaking process.
and so, I've made many experimental shorts where we're filming it and people will kind of have no idea what I'm going for. I'm just like just wait and see, wait and see. And because I have the editing in my mind, and then that comes out and they're like, oh, okay, so that's what you were trying to do. Okay, this makes sense now.
Right.
So I've been through the ringer in that way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I'm saying this, not as a criticism, but just as a fact. Like some of your older short films, like some of them work better than others, just because like that's what you had to work with. It's the raw material, and
Yeah.
if you're a better craftsman, with a better cut of wood, it's going to be easier to make something. But even if you don't have the best cut of wood, you can maybe make a good chair. I've never worked in honest day in my life. I don't know how to do
Well,
this.
it's also like,
I want to. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
well, I was just saying, like, my first edit of movement, I wanted to keep in as much as I could, and then a year later, I was able to have a better eye and trim about 25 minutes off of it, and I think that's the better edit. Even though I'm glad both cuts exist of my first film, if you want an extra padding, it's there, but it's a learning process, and this is where I think he got a taste of what he wants to do with his style. And it's fascinating to see films where filmmakers are cutting teeth. It's especially fascinating to me as I continue to grow as a filmmaker. So yeah, this movie was really cool for that reason.
Yeah, I have two words for you on multiple edits. Ridley Scott. Okay.
Yeah.
It can change a movie.
Some of that is not his fault.
And some of it is.
Some of it is.
It depends on the movie.
Harrison
I'm gonna read. I normally
Ford-
don't do this, and I hate starting a sentence this way. I'm gonna read a tweet from Alfonso Cuarón.
Yeah.
I didn't realize this was 5 years ago. Jesus, man, what's happening? When the Oscars moved cinematography and three other awards to the commercial breaks,
Despicable.
which I don't even know if they still do that because I don't watch the Oscars anymore. I don't have cable. Get with the times. Allow it for streaming.
I
Let
gamble.
it stream on your website for $1. I don't know.
I
Yeah,
gamble on the Oscars.
But,
so I
but
watch it.
even then, they probably don't have the infrastructure to do that. Their servers would crash. But I digress. Anyway, he said, in the history of cinema, masterpieces have existed without sound, without color, without a story, without actors, and without music. No one single film has ever existed without cinematography and without editing. Because otherwise, you're filming a stage play, essentially, which you can't do that.
But you're not filming a stage play if there's no cinematography. You're not filming anything.
Right. It's not cinema. Cinema means motion. It comes from the same root word as kinetic. If we're gonna, get all linguistic up in here.
Nerd.
Yeah. Amen,
I am a
brother.
nerd. I have a film podcast. Of course I'm a nerd. What are you doing?
I'm not a fucking nerd.
And
I have a
Roma,
film
man.
podcast.
If you haven't watched Roma, Alfonso Cuarón's movie from 2018, which is probably what he's up in arms about, that is like a definite good movie to study for movement in film. And man,
I had a friend of mine she's done a writer, some like translation work for scripts and stuff. And she argued that the story to Roma, like so she was like, Roma looks good, but the story isn't really there. And I kind of just wanted to bit my tongue and didn't want to be like, you can't read cinematography, is why.
Mhm.
If you think the story's not there, it's there, you know.
Mhm.
And also you might be confusing story and plot, which this
Yeah.
movie has a Days of Heaven has a deep story despite having a thin
Plot
plot.
cells would hate this movie, and we are
Plot
anti-plot
cells.
cell at this
Plot
fucking.
cells.
We're not anti-plot, but we're anti-plot cell. I've never heard of that term until now, but I
It
immediately know what
is
you mean.
There's only a few things that ever
horribly
throw me
prevalent.
off plot wise, and I think the main one is Southland Tales. Fucking hated that.
Yeah, which is understandable because that has a very dense plot, but does it have a story?
Plot cells cannot fathom a film having any scenes that isn't expressing dialogue that pushes the narrative forward, and they
Which
just
is such a very, I hate to say it, a very like American studio style of filmmaking, you know.
yeah.
Which is good. There's Tarantino's talked about this. Like America, we're known for our plots. That is what we do, you know, in our stories. Our new wave was not, weird editing and character dramas. Our new wave. I mean, yeah, you have your it's Coppola, who's definitely known for his plots.
Yeah. So that was fascinating to me. And I hate reading about some of the people's takes on it because it's very like, what's the point of this movie? I
Of
don't
what,
know.
this movie?
Yeah.
Of any movie, yeah.
Oh,
This
yeah,
one.
what's the point of anything? What's the point of me living? Why don't I just
Yeah.
kill myself right now? Like I could take that conversation a million ways.
Yeah.
That irritates me. Um,
Well, it's just like, I don't know. Why did this guy, I guess it's his anger issues because he could have just like given up and like claimed self-defense. This guy came out with a gun, so he stabbed him. That's self-defense. He could have
Mhm.
probably got weaseled his way out of it, especially back then.
I
I
don't know
don't
if he
know.
could have with the disparity between poor and rich.
Maybe. Yeah, that might be
I
a
think he'd be like, fuck. Also, he's on the run for another murder.
oh yeah.
So number two, they're gonna be like, oh, you're kind of fucked.
And this was this was when I don't think you had a court-appointed lawyer then. I think it depended on what state and stuff, but I think like federally, I don't know if that might have been later that we got a
The
court-appointed.
only reason why I think it might be, you may be wrong is because every time I see like a lawyer show from back then, someone comes in and he's like, I do declare I'll represent this man. And
That
it's
is
always
true.
like
I don't
some
know.
I'm about to
And
look at it. I'm curious.
again, this entire podcast is me talking out of my ass and trying to sound smarter than I really am.
Let me see.
I'm Joe Rogan.
no. It is. Yeah, I don't know why she wouldn't. Why she would go with those soldiers if she's got money now? I'd try and settle in. I don't know.
Maybe she's exploring. I mean, that can be read a lot of different ways. She might just be finally, I'm free of this. I can live my life. Although she also unshackles herself from, uh, yeah, I mean, Linda, who is not, I realized, her daughter.
Yeah,
No,
But
it's
not her
they're not
sister.
related.
yeah, I think she did feel, there's definitely a feminist take of this movie, shackled by this, but is that the right thing? How much of your responsibility is it? Because you've been a surrogate mother, for this kid. Because we don't know what happened. Bill estranged his old family and ran off with his kid, or his
I'm sure his parents probably
dead.
died,
Yeah,
and then he had to
probably at a
take over.
young
That's
age.
probably why he's in the factories. He probably had to do that at a younger age, which is tale as old as time for Industrial Revolution America. And I'm sure she got a solid amount of money and thought the best thing to do for her was to put her in a place where she could be educated. And then with her money, she's experiencing freedom.
Yeah, that
That's
makes
what I'm
Which is
thinking
fair.
for.
But then the sins of the father are inherited,
Yeah.
because
I
she
mean-
ends up running off from this preparatory school or academy or whatever it is.
Yep.
And is that continuing a cycle or is that its own liberation?
Most likely a little both. I don't know. since the father thing is
I think
a
it's her
heavy.
own liberation. I think she's going to be able to find her own way in the new world and kind of get further and further away from her past. And because she didn't,
Maybe,
it's
you
not like
know,
she didn't kill anybody, she wasn't a part of the scheme. She was kind of just there.
but then arguably this kid is not educated. It can probably barely read. Would staying at that prep school not do anything? Is that just her being unable to be constrained by civilization?
Yeah,
Probably.
maybe so.
Ooh.
I mean, because this movie straight brings up it has again, it's agrarian versus industrial. It's Rousseau versus Hobbes. It's freedom. It's the individual versus the collective. It's so many things. It's everything.
Yeah.
Everything is in this movie.
Such a simple conceptual movie to just be
Yeah.
expansive and have so many things included into it.
Because everything is kind of simple. I really think it is. I think we
It's
overcomplicate the shit out of things in our modern world. And it's
every
because it's become so complicated. But
well
really, like humans have been dealing with these same core ideas always.
forever. It's human life is a shared experience. Nothing that has ever happened to you has not happened to someone before and will not
No,
happen
I'm
after.
different. I'm special. I'm special, Casher.
Your feeling, everybody's feelings are valid, but there is no new feeling or thought on the planet.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't have a Stanley Cup, so I'm different. So
You don't
But,
have a Stanley Cup, or you do?
I don't, because I'm not a suburban 20-year-old girl. That's just like
I thought you meant the actual the hockey. I'm like, you don't play hockey. Of course
no,
you
I'm
Yeah.
talking
play.
about the joke of
I
like
was just saying, Adrian would only know what the Stanley Cup is from like the thing and not know the hockey one.
Okay.
You got the Piston Cup though. You did what in your cup?
oh, good one. My favorite Pixar Disney movie, 2006
Only
Cars.
good joking Cars. You did what in that cup? Cracks me up every time.
Every redneck in the theater chuckled to themselves.
What are the cable guys in this movie? Dan Whitney. We call him Dan Whitney on this podcast.
Yeah.
Next on the podcast is gonna be Larry the Cable Guy, Health Inspector.
And we'll do
Code
Bob
name the cleaner.
Butler.
Codename the Cleaner, Mr. Deeds
Codename
2.
the Cleaner, your favorite movie of all time.
Hey! I like Cedric.
No, I will
It might
say
be the worst movie I've ever seen in theaters.
before we wrap up, I do want to say that the scene where he does pretty much burn down his own place in anger is one of the coolest looking sequences in film I've ever seen. And the way the edit becomes so much more sporadic immediately, and it's like you yourself are there and you're just spun around in a confused daze trying to see what the hell is going on. It's a brilliantly shot and brilliantly edited, and it's amazing that the film had two different cinematographers for different parts of the movie, and one of them did his best to match the first guy. And the composer of this film, I forgot to mention, he was the composer of the last film we did on here, The Great Silence, and he did Good and the Bad and the Ugly, and Late,
which is another Western connection. It's Ennio Morricone, and I still can't consider this a Western, despite it fitting so many tropes, because it's such a metaphysical goddamn movie.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, would you consider Paris, Texas, Western?
Yeah, no, see, it's got some DNA in there, but yeah, I wouldn't consider it that. That's a fair comparison though. Yeah. So
also just before we get off here, you guys, Doug Kershaw's in this, who's a legendary Louisianan fiddler who I would fucking kill to see live.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's the guy who fiddles in the movie, which blew my fucking mind. I was like, whoa, Doug Kershaw's in
Also, I like that the farmer just has the money to invite two vaudeville performers to come perform for him at his farm and shit.
It's like the equivalent of getting a pizza party for all your hard work at work.
Yeah, that's what I was. So he just paid those guys to come in because his wife wouldn't bang him, and he's like, "Well, maybe this will cheer you up." Is that basically what happened?
Yeah, maybe she might have just been depressed or something, or maybe he just wanted to see it. I don't know.
Would you like living on the farm like this?
Here's the thing.
If I were the farmer.
If you're the farmer.
I would like having somewhere that's secluded that I could come to and stay for maybe a couple months, but I'd want a place in the country, but also a place like a flat in the city. My aunt in Kosovo, in Pristina, she has a city flat when she is teaching, and then during the summers she has her little farmhouse, and I think that is a cool ass setup.
It
I
is.
got.
That's one of the ways you can tell somebody's rich is if they
Oh,
use
she's
Oh
not.
summer
yeah,
or winter as a verb.
my
Um,
buddy Clint. Shout out to Clint Evans. You'll never watch this podcast, I'm sure. He's
oh,
a
then
old.
start Clint.
He's an older guy. He's a deadhead who has. He's a surgeon, but he also records jam band shows at every show. So he's gone all year. But he has an apartment in Fayetteville and then in a house way out in the fucking sticks.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like civilization too much. I mean, I would like to have, multiple places, but
Oh no,
gun to my head, there has to be a pizza restaurant nearby.
put me
I'm
in the
not
middle of
gonna.
fucking nowhere and I will be happy.
Yeah, that's you, Casher. That ain't
I'd
me.
have to have a home theater there though, because otherwise, I don't know. I don't want to drive 2 hours to go see a fucking movie.
Yeah, I heard that.
That would suck.
So,
But,
But you
Oh,
can
man.
hire vaudeville performers.
yeah, or yeah, get some belly dancers and shit in my home. Imagine Parker's like eating dinner and the doorbell rings. I'm like, oh, they're here. It's like,
Guy in a bear costume just barges in with a little person. You're like, what's happening?
flying circuses are fucking tight.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that about wraps up our episode.
Mm.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Next week, we're doing Conan the Barbarian. If you want,
Yeah, buddy.
we have plenty of episodes. Go check them out. Share if you like them. Subscribe and all that cool stuff. We have a tie-in film called The Patrician's Guide to Kino. Go check that out. Scott does comedy. If you've
At Scott K Comedy, if you're in Little Rock, I got a
if
couple
you live in
gigs coming up
Arkansas,
in February. So that'll be fun.
I don't do anything.
we got other episodes. We also I do some video essays. Got another one I'm working on, but there's one on Asteroid City you can check out. We have a secondary channel called The Mooring Line where you can find all of my films, one of which ties into here, like I said earlier, Patrician's Guide. So anyway,
One of them I do nitrous in it.
yeah. So go check that stuff out if you want. We're growing here. This is going to be a good year for the harbor. I can already see it. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Live, laugh, love.